Russia, a nation practically synonymous with Bond villains, impossibly bleak literature, and more recently, a rather aggressive approach to international borders. Yes, the country that gave us Tetris, and arguably, the concept of grim determination. Once the colossal heart of a global superpower, a behemoth that made the West collectively wet its pants for decades, now finds itself at the very messy, very loud, very complicated center of 21st century geopolitics. It's like the world's most problematic dinner guest who also happens to own a terrifying amount of nuclear cutlery. But as the calendar pages flip towards 2025, a year that sounds vaguely futuristic but is alarmingly just around the corner, the big flashing neon question is, how powerful is Russia? Really, is it still the formidable bear of global nightmares, or more like a slightly mangy badger with a surprisingly loud roar? What does its future hold? Will it rise again, phoenix-like from the ashes of sanctions and conflict, perhaps fueled by sheer stubbornness and an endless supply of potatoes? Or will it crumble slowly but surely, under the immense weight of global sanctions, a grinding war, and relentless economic pressure? This isn't just some academic exercise, folks. This isn't just one country's dramatic soap opera. It's a forecast that could dictate the future of global power, peace, and the price of your gas. So, welcome to Mar Fact Nova, where today we're not just peering into the crystal ball, we're smashing it open and sifting through the glittery, confusing pieces. We're here to uncover the often uncomfortable truth behind Russia's present, and make some educated, slightly terrified predictions about its future. Strap in, because this is going to be a bumpy and frankly quite chilly ride. Let's get into it. Right, to understand where Russia might be going, we first need a quick, and I mean recap of where it's been. Think of it as the previously on for a particularly grim geopolitical drama. After the Soviet Union dramatically imploded in 1991, a collapse so total it was like a political Jenga tower, finally giving up the ghost. Russia was, to put it mildly, a hot mess. Economically shattered, politically as stable as a unicyclist on a tightrope during an earthquake, and socially more divided than a pizza at a pineapple haters convention. It was bleak, really bleak. We're talking subsisting on turnips and existential dread bleak. Then, striding onto this chaotic stage, often shirtless for some reason, came one Vladimir Putin, around the year 2000, and under his, shall we say, leadership, the country began a slow, methodical process of rebuilding itself, or at least rebuilding its image. The strategy was pretty straightforward: pump out a metric ton of oil and gas, flex those military muscles like a bodybuilder who's just discovered mirrors, and get really good at this newfangled cyber influence thing. This era of resurgence, or perhaps more accurately, reassertion, chugged along with a kind of steely determination. Russia was back on the world stage, not always liked, rarely trusted, but undeniably present. The oil money flowed, the military parades got bigger, and the cyber shenanigans, well, they got more influential. But then came 2014, the year everything changed. The year the simmering pot of geopolitical tension well and truly boiled over with the annexation of Crimea. Alright, let's talk money. Or more specifically, let's talk about the black, sticky, flammable stuff that, for Russia, basically money energy. If you want to define Russia's economy with one word, that word is energy. As of 2024, a staggering and frankly quite precarious over 45% of Russia's entire government revenue comes from oil and natural gas. For decades, Europe was the main customer, happily or perhaps nervously, slurping up Russian gas like it was in bottomless mimosa brunch. Until of course it suddenly isn't, or the supplier decides to use the pipeline like a geopolitical chokehold. The war in Ukraine didn't just change borders, it slammed the emergency brake on Europe's energy relationship with Russia. With the West collectively saying, "Niet spasibo" to Russian energy, or at least trying to with varying degrees of success and a lot of grumbling about heating bills, Russia had to find new friends, so it turned its gaze, and its pipelines, eastward. China, the giant industrial vacuum cleaner of the world, became a prime target. India, always on the lookout for a bargain, also stepped up. This pivot to Asia wasn't just a polite suggestion, it was an economic necessity. Now, if Russia's energy sector is facing a stiff headwind, the rest of its economy is basically trying to fly a kite in a hurricane, and that hurricane has a name: sanctions. Oh boy, the sanctions. Over 13,000 individual sanctions have been slapped on Russia since 2022. 13. These weren't just symbolic gestures, they targeted everything. Russian banks were cut off from global financial systems, making international trade a logistical nightmare. Oil exports faced price caps and embargoes, attempting to starve the Kremlin of its primary revenue source. Oligarchs, those larger-than-life figures of Russian wealth, found their superyachts seized, and their London penthouses suddenly less welcoming. And crucially, access to Western technology, from microchips to software to advanced machinery, was severely curtailed. It was a coordinated global effort to economically isolate and pressure Russia. And did it work? Well, in 2023 alone, Russia's GDP shrank by over 2.5%. That might not sound catastrophic, but for a country trying to fund a war and project power, it's a significant hit. Alright, so Russia's economy might be doing an impression of a leaky sieve, and its conventional military might be, shall we say, preoccupied. But there are two areas where Russia remains an undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, capable of making even the most stoic global leader break into a cold sweat. I'm talking, of course, about cyber warfare and its absolutely colossal stockpile of nuclear weapons. These are the trump cards, the aces up the Kremlin's voluminous sleeve. Let's start with the big one, literally nuclear power. Russia possesses over 5,889 nuclear warheads. 5,889. That's not just a lot, it's the most of any nation on Earth. More than the US, more than China, more than anyone. It's enough to end civilization as we know it several times over, which is, a comforting thought. This arsenal isn't just for show, it's the ultimate guarantor of Russian sovereignty in their eyes, the line in the sand that they dare the world to cross. And they're not shy about reminding everyone it exists. Then there's the less overtly explosive, but arguably just as disruptive domain of cyber warfare. Russia's influence here extends far beyond its physical borders, slithering through the fiber optic cables of the internet like a particularly malicious digital snake. We're talking sophisticated cyber attacks targeting critical infrastructure from power grids to financial institutions. We're talking vast, coordinated disinformation campaigns, spreading fake news and propaganda designed to sow chaos, discord, and mistrust in other nations. It's a digital fog of war. Ukraine, the war that was supposed to be a swift, decisive special military operation, a 3-day affair, a quick jaunt to Kyiv, install a friendly government, and be home in time for tea and state-sponsored parades. That was the plan anyway. Instead, it morphed into a brutal, grinding quagmire, a meat grinder of human lives and military hardware. And by 2025, it's the conflict that just refuses to end, like a particularly unwelcome house guest who's eaten all your food and is now eyeing your curtains. By the time we're looking at 2025, the intensity of the fighting may have decreased from its peak, not because peace has broken out, but more likely due to a grim combination of exhaustion, entrenched positions, and the sheer depletion of resources on both sides. Think less of dramatic frontline charges, and more of a World War I-style stalemate, with sporadic, vicious flare-ups along a heavily fortified line of contact. The headlines might be less frequent, but the suffering undoubtedly continues. The human cost is, frankly, staggering and horrifying. Now, despite the absolute mauling its military has taken in Ukraine, with tanks becoming impromptu toast racks and its logistics looking like something organized by a particularly confused squirrel, Russia has been loudly and repeatedly proclaiming its ongoing military modernization. We're talking hypersonic missiles that are supposedly unstoppable, new generations of tanks that are allegedly superior to anything the West has, and AI-based battlefield systems that sound like they're straight out of a Terminator movie. It's all very impressive, very shiny, and very, very loud. The Kremlin's propaganda machine has been working overtime, showcasing these technological marvels in slickly produced videos, often featuring dramatic music and computer-generated animations of these wonder weapons obliterating their targets. It's designed to project an image of undiminished, even enhanced, military prowess. Sure, the message seems to be, we lost a few thousand tanks in Ukraine, but look, we have this new one, it's better, and it flies. Maybe. It's a classic case of trying to awe your adversaries and perhaps reassure your own population. But here's the multi-billion-dollar question. How much of this is real, tangible capability, and how much is, well, military-grade vaporware or carefully curated propaganda? Experts, those killjoys who actually look at things like production numbers and battlefield performance rather than just cool videos, offer a more nuanced picture. They'll tell you that yes, the Russian military-industrial complex is still capable of producing some very advanced and dangerous weaponry. Those hypersonic missiles, for example, are a genuine concern. However, they also point out that the Russian military is powerful, yes, but also significantly overstretched and facing enormous challenges. Beyond the battlefield, Russia's future, like every other nation's, ostensibly lies in the glittering, often bewildering realms of technology, space, and artificial intelligence. These are the new frontiers, the arenas where 21st century power will increasingly be forged, and Russia, despite its current predicaments, is desperately trying to remain a player in this high-stakes game. It's like trying to join a poker game with a dwindling stack of chips, but a very determined bluff. In the realm of space, for instance, Roscosmos, Russia's space agency, inheritor of the proud Soviet legacy of Sputnik and Gagarin, is making ambitious pronouncements. They're collaborating with China, another nation with its eyes firmly on the cosmos, with grand plans to reach the moon, perhaps even establish a joint lunar base by 2030. It's a clear signal. If the West won't play with us in orbit, we'll find new partners. It's the space race, but with a new Cold War-esque buddy system. Then there's the ever-buzzing field of artificial intelligence. AI is the magic pixie dust that everyone believes will transform, well, everything. And Russia is no exception. They are reportedly investing heavily in AI applications for drone warfare, developing autonomous defense systems, think robot sentries, which is not at all terrifying, and of course integrating AI into their already formidable cyber AI systems to make their disinformation campaigns even more insidiously effective. Imagine fake news so personalized and convincing, it makes your targeted Facebook ads look like amateur hour. With the welcome mat to the West decidedly pulled in, trampled on, and possibly set on fire, Russia has been forced to go looking for new friends. Or perhaps more accurately, new partners of convenience. This isn't about shared democratic values or a mutual love of ballet. This is about survival, about finding anyone willing to trade, to cooperate, or at least not actively condemn you on the world stage. And so, Russia has turned east and south, with the enthusiasm of a recently dumped singleton hitting the dating apps. The most prominent of these realignments involves strengthening ties within frameworks like BRICS, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, a grouping that sounds more like a law firm than a geopolitical alliance, but is increasingly positioning itself as an alternative to Western-led global institutions. Russia sees BRICS as a key platform to push for a multipolar world order, which is a polite way of saying a world where America isn't calling all the shots. Then there's the more shadowy, less formal axis of the aggrieved or coalition of the sanctioned, a burgeoning if uneasy partnership with countries like China, Iran, and North Korea. These are nations that also find themselves on the receiving end of Western pressure, and they see in Russia a fellow traveler or at least a useful counterweight. It's a relationship built less on genuine affection and more on the principle of the enemy of my enemy is, well, someone I can sell drones to or buy artillery shells from. These partnerships are, to be blunt, transactional. China, for instance, is Russia's most powerful new friend, but Beijing is playing a very careful game. They're happy to buy discounted Russian oil and gas, and they'll make sympathetic noises about NATO expansion, but they're also wary of secondary sanctions and have their own global ambitions, which don't always align perfectly with Moscow's. China is using Russia, just as Russia is trying to use China. So after all that, the history, the oil, the sanctions, the nukes, the war, the shiny but maybe not so shiny new toys, and the awkward new international friendships, what does the forecast actually show for Russia in 2025? If we dust off our geopolitical crystal ball, which let's be honest is probably made in China and prone to glitches, what kind of bear do we see emerging from the Siberian fog? Is it a roaring grizzly, a wounded wolf, or something else entirely? Well, the consensus, if such a thing exists when predicting the future of a nation as complex and opaque as Russia, points towards a country that is, first and foremost, economically strained, but crucially probably stable. or at least not in a state of outright collapse. Think less freefall and more grinding, uncomfortable descent to a new lower plateau. The sanctions will continue to bite, innovation will be stifled, but the sheer size of its resource base and the government's tight control over the economy will likely prevent a total meltdown. It'll be a tougher life for many, but the system itself will likely endure, propped up by oil sales to the east and a hefty dose of state intervention. Politically, expect Russia in 2025 to be even more hardened, more authoritarian, and more insular. The Kremlin, under Putin or a successor cut from the same cloth, will have likely consolidated its power further, using the external pressures and the ongoing conflict as justification for even tighter controls on society, information, and any form of dissent. The narrative of a fortress Russia besieged by a hostile West will be the dominant, state-mandated reality. It will be a political climate where loyalty is paramount and questioning the official line is not just discouraged but dangerous. Militarily, Russia will remain a powerful force, but one that is demonstrably not invincible, and certainly more regionally focused than globally ambitious in a conventional sense. Its nuclear arsenal will continue to be its ultimate security blanket, its cyber capabilities a constant nagging threat. The lessons from Ukraine will have been learned, or at least some of them. Expect a continued emphasis on asymmetric warfare, on leveraging its strengths in areas where the West is vulnerable, while slowly trying to rebuild and re-equip its conventional forces, albeit with significant limitations. So, Russia in 2025, it's not the Russia of the Soviet era, nor is it the hopeful, chaotic Russia of the 1990s, and it's certainly not the resurgent power it projected itself to be in the early 2000s. Its power is undeniably changing, shifting perhaps from the overt brute force of open warfare, which has proven incredibly costly, towards a more sustained reliance on silent influence, on cyber disruption, on leveraging its nuclear umbrella, and on cultivating alliances of convenience. It's a different kind of power, perhaps a more desperate kind, but power nonetheless. And as the world stumbles, lurches, and occasionally faceplants into a new era, an era defined by shifting alliances, simmering conflicts, and the relentless advance of technology, Russia will undoubtedly play a role. Whether that role is as a diminished but still dangerous superpower, a regional spoiler, a strategic partner for some, or simply a global wildcard, remains one of the most pressing questions of our